A few months ago, I could understand small pieces of English. If someone asked me a simple question, I became nervous immediately. I knew some grammar rules. I had memorized many words in school. But when it was time to actually speak, my mind became completely blank. Today, things are very different. I can have conversations in English naturally. I can understand movies, podcasts, and meetings without feeling lost. And the most surprising part is this: I did not move to another country. I did not spend thousands of dollars on courses, and I did not study for 10 hours a day. What changed my English was not talent, it was changing the way I learned. If you sometimes feel frustrated with your English, if you feel shy while speaking, or if you think fluency is only possible for other people, then I want you to stay with me until the end, because I once felt exactly the same way. My story really began after a very difficult experience. For a long time, I wanted to work for an international company. I worked as a programmer, and I spent years improving my technical skills. I practiced coding every day. I studied new technologies. I believed that hard work alone would be enough for success. Then one day, I finally got a chance to interview for a company abroad. I still remember reading the email. I felt excited, proud, and nervous at the same time. It felt like the opportunity I had waited for all my life. But during the interview, everything fell apart. The interview started normally. The interviewers smiled and introduced themselves. Then they began asking questions in English. Their speech sounded fast and natural, and I struggled to follow what they were saying. I understood some words, but not enough. Then one interviewer asked me to introduce myself and talk about my experience. Inside my mind, I knew exactly what I wanted to say, but when I opened my mouth, the sentences came out broken and confusing. I paused too much. I forgot easy words. I could feel my confidence disappearing minute by minute. The interview ended quickly. After the call, I sat alone in silence for a long time. That moment hurt deeply because I realized something important. My technical skills were not the problem. The real problem was communication. I understood then that English was not just another subject in school. It was a tool that could open doors, create opportunities, and completely change a person's future. That day became a turning point in my life. I promised myself that I would stop learning English the old way. No more endless grammar exercises without speaking. No more memorizing random vocabulary lists that I would forget later. I needed a practical method, something simple, realistic, and useful in daily life. So I created my own learning routine. The first thing I changed was my focus. Before, I always believed I needed to learn more words first. I thought fluency meant knowing thousands of difficult vocabulary items, but the truth was very different. I already knew many English words. The real problem was that I could not use them naturally. So during the first few weeks, I stopped trying to learn complicated vocabulary. Instead, I focused on basic, everyday communication. I made a list of simple sentences that people use in normal life. Sentences like, "Can you repeat that?" "I'm still learning English." "What do you mean?" "Could you help me?" "I'm not sure." Every morning, I read those sentences aloud again and again. Slowly, they started feeling automatic. I no longer needed to translate each word in my head. That small change gave me confidence. Another habit helped me even more. I started speaking to myself in English every day. At first, it felt strange. Honestly, I even laughed at myself sometimes, but I continued anyway. While cooking, I described what I was doing. While cleaning my room, I talked about my plans for the day. While walking outside, I described the weather, the people around me, and the things I could see. These were not perfect conversations. The grammar was not always correct, but something important was happening inside my brain. English was slowly becoming natural instead of foreign. For the first time, I stopped treating English like an exam subject. It became part of my daily life. Then I added another practice method that changed my pronunciation completely. Instead of studying pronunciation rules from books, I started copying native speakers directly. I would choose a short clip from a movie, podcast, or video. I listened carefully to one sentence, then paused the audio and repeated it exactly the same way. Not only the words, I copied the speed, rhythm, emotion, and pronunciation. In the beginning, it was difficult. My voice sounded different, my mouth felt uncomfortable trying to copy certain sounds. But after repeating the same lines many times, I noticed clear improvement. Little by little, my speech became smoother. I also discovered that listening was just as important as speaking. Many learners try to speak immediately without training their ears first. But understanding spoken English takes practice too. So every day I listened to English content for at least an hour. Sometimes I listened to podcasts while walking. Sometimes I watched simple interviews with subtitles. Sometimes I listened to slow English stories before sleeping. At first I understood maybe 20%, then 30%, then 50%. Eventually, my ears became more familiar with natural English rhythm. For several weeks, I felt like nothing was changing. I still made mistakes. I still forgot words. Some days I felt frustrated and tired, but I continued anyway. And suddenly, small improvements started appearing everywhere. I could understand simple videos without subtitles. I could answer questions faster. I stopped freezing during conversations. That was the moment I understood the power of consistency. You do not become fluent in one dramatic moment. Fluency grows quietly through small daily habits. After building basic confidence, I moved to the next stage. I wanted to speak longer without hesitation. So I started practicing something very simple every day. I asked myself questions in English and answered them aloud. Questions like, what did you do today? What are your future goals? What kind of movies do you enjoy? At first, my answers were extremely short, but then I challenged myself to add more details every time. For example, instead of saying, I watched a movie, I would continue, I watched a movie with my friend after dinner. It was a comedy and it made me laugh a lot. This exercise trained my brain to build sentences naturally and quickly. The more I practiced, the easier speaking became. I also stopped being afraid of mistakes. This was a huge mental change for me. Before, every mistake felt embarrassing. I wanted every sentence to be perfect before speaking, but perfection was actually slowing me down. Native speakers do not expect learners to speak perfectly. Most people are patient and supportive when they see someone genuinely trying to communicate. Once I accepted that mistakes were normal, speaking became much less stressful. I remember one day when I joined an online English conversation group for the first time. I was extremely nervous before entering the call. My hands were shaking. I thought everyone would judge my accent or laugh at my mistakes. But the opposite happened. People listened kindly. They encouraged me to continue speaking. Some of them were also learners from different countries, facing the same fears I had. That experience changed my confidence completely. For the first time, English felt like a real connection between people, not just a difficult school subject. From that point, my improvement became much faster. As my confidence grew, I started paying closer attention to the way native speakers actually use English in real life. I noticed something interesting very quickly. The English people use in conversations is often different from the English many of us learn in textbooks. Native speakers use natural expressions, connected speech, and sentence patterns that sound more relaxed and fluid. So instead of memorizing grammar rules for hours, I began learning grammar through observation. Whenever I heard a sentence that sounded natural, I wrote it down. Then I asked myself simple questions. Why did they use this tense? Why did they choose this preposition? Why does this sentence sound more natural than the version I learned in school? For example, I often heard people say, "I've been working all day." But years earlier, I had only learned simpler structures like, "I work all day." Understanding these differences helped me sound more natural little by little. I also struggled with small grammar details, especially prepositions. Sometimes English felt confusing. Why do people say "on the bus" but "in the car"? Why do we say "at night" but "in the morning"? Instead of getting frustrated, I created a small notebook where I collected useful examples. Every time I found a confusing sentence, I wrote it down with context. Over time, those patterns became easier to understand naturally. At the same time, I started writing short diary entries every night in English. In the beginning, my writing was extremely simple. Today I went to work. I cooked dinner. I felt tired. But after a few weeks, my sentences became more detailed and expressive. Writing helped me organize my thoughts in English without pressure. It also showed me my weak areas clearly. If I could not write something easily, it usually meant I also could not say it naturally during conversations. Another habit that improved my English dramatically was shadowing. This technique became one of my favorites because it trained listening, pronunciation, rhythm, and speaking speed at the same time. I would put on headphones and listen to native speakers carefully. Then, almost immediately after hearing a sentence, I repeated it aloud while trying to match the speaker's rhythm and pronunciation. At first, I could barely keep up, but after practicing every day, my speech started sounding smoother and more connected. I also became much better at understanding fast English. Movies became easier to follow. Podcasts sounded clearer. Conversations stopped feeling overwhelming. One thing that surprised me during this journey was how important confidence really is.
Many people actually know more English than they think. The real problem is fear. Fear of making mistakes, fear of sounding different, fear of being judged. I had all of those fears too, but I slowly realized something powerful. Confidence does not come before practice. Confidence comes from practice. The more I spoke, the less afraid I became. I started using English whenever possible, at restaurants, at stores, in online communities, even during short daily interactions. Sometimes I made mistakes. Sometimes I forgot words in the middle of a sentence, but every conversation taught me something new. Instead of seeing mistakes as failures, I started seeing them as part of progress. That mindset changed everything. One of the biggest moments in my journey happened during an online discussion group. People from different countries were talking together in English. Months earlier, I would have stayed silent during a conversation like that, but this time, I decided to participate fully. At first, I still felt nervous, but after a few minutes, something incredible happened. I stopped thinking about grammar. I stopped translating in my head. I simply focused on communication. The conversation flowed naturally. People responded to my ideas, asked me questions, and understood me clearly. That moment felt unreal. For the first time, I truly felt that English had become part of me. A few weeks later, I decided to try again for another international job interview. This time, everything felt different from the beginning. I entered the interview calmly. When the interviewer asked questions, I answered naturally and clearly. I was not perfect, but I was confident, and confidence changes the entire energy of a conversation. I could explain my ideas properly. I could share my experiences without panic. I could finally show my real abilities. A few days later, I received the email. I got the job. I still remember sitting quietly after reading the message. For a few seconds, I could hardly believe it. The same kind of opportunity that once felt impossible was now real. And it happened because I refused to quit.
That moment taught me an important lesson. Learning English is not only about language. It is about changing your future. It is about creating opportunities that once felt unreachable. It is about becoming more confident in yourself. Looking back now, I realized there were several lessons that made the biggest difference in my journey. The first lesson is that mindset matters more than people think. For years, I believed English was too difficult for me. That belief slowed me down more than grammar ever did. Once I started believing improvement was possible, I became more patient with myself. Instead of saying, "My English is terrible," I started saying, "My English is improving every day." That small mental shift changed the way I approached learning. The second lesson is consistency. You do not need perfect study plans. You do not need expensive courses. You do not need to study 12 hours a day. What truly matters is regular contact with the language. Even small daily practice creates huge results over time. Some days I practiced speaking for an hour. Other days I only listened to English during a walk, but I always stayed connected to the language somehow. The third lesson is active learning. Passive learning alone is not enough. Watching videos without speaking will not build fluency quickly. Reading grammar books without listening will also not be enough. You need to interact with English actively. Speak aloud. Repeat sentences. Ask yourself questions. Write your thoughts. Use the language daily, even when it feels uncomfortable. The fourth lesson is patience. Many learners quit because they expect fast perfection. But language learning is gradual. At times, progress feels slow and invisible. That is completely normal. There were many days when I felt stuck, but every small practice session was still building something inside my brain, and eventually those small efforts connected together. Finally, I learned that mistakes are not your enemy. Mistakes are proof that you are trying. Every fluent speaker once made beginner mistakes too. The important thing is continuing anyway. Today, when I think about the person I was months earlier, I almost can't recognize him. Back then, English felt like a wall standing between me and my dreams. Now it feels like a bridge connecting me to new people, new opportunities, and a bigger world. And if you are struggling with English right now, I want you to remember something very important. You do not need to become perfect tomorrow. You only need to improve little by little, day by day. Start speaking even if your sentences are simple. Start listening even if you understand only a small percentage. Start writing even if your grammar is not perfect. Progress begins the moment you stop waiting for perfection. One day you will look back and realize that the difficult beginning was actually the start of a completely new chapter in your life. Thank you for spending this time with me today. I truly hope this story encourages you to continue your own English journey with patience and confidence. Keep practicing, keep believing in yourself, and remember that every small step matters. Your future English-speaking self is being built one day at a time.